Hi everyone, welcome back to Where the Red Fern Grows Read Aloud. Today we are in chapter 14 of Where the Red Fern Grows, and we are 14 out of the 20 chapters. We have read all this. We have just a little bit left, a little over more than halfway. Very exciting. Each chapter holds something interesting and exciting. It holds so much information. Since chapter 1, it has been captivating towards me. I love this book. Everything that has it. Billy, the main character, Billy, some of his characteristics are so honorable. The way he's determined in all the experiences that he's going through as a young boy are very interesting to read about. So today we are in chapter 14 of Where the Red Fern Grows. Chapter 13 yesterday was an unfortunate accident that happened with one of the Pritchard boys. He ended up dying while they were hunting for the ghost coon. Billy was bothered by it, and chapter 13 left off with Billy paying his respects to his grave, and that really released a lot of burden that Billy had on him, and it made him feel a lot better. So we are going into chapter 14 today of Where the Red Fern Grows. A few days later, on his way back from the mill, one of the Hatfield boys stopped at our place. He told me my grandfather wanted me. It was unusual for Grandpa to send for me. It had me worried. I figured he wanted to talk about the death of the Pritchard boy. I always enjoyed talking to my grandpa, but I didn't want to talk about Reuben's death. Every time I thought of it, I lived the horrible tragedy all over again. After a practically sleepless night, the next morning I started for the store. I was walking along in a deep thought when little Ann zipped by me. She was happy as a young gray squirrel. She wiggled and twisted, and once she barked at me. I looked behind. There was old Dan trotting along. He stopped when I turned around. Little Ann came up to me. I scolded them and tried to explain that I wasn't going hunting. I was just going up to the store to see what Grandpa had wanted. I couldn't. They couldn't or didn't want to understand. I picked up a small stick and slapped my leg with it. In a deep voice, I said, "Now, you go home or I'm going to wear you out." This hurt their feelings. With their tail between their legs and trying side by side, they started back. Every little way they could stop and look back at me, it was too much. I couldn't stand it. I began to feel bad all over again. "Well, all right," I said. "Come on, you can go. But Dan, if there's any dogs around the store and you get in a fight, I won't take you hunting for a whole year. And I mean that," although I knew I didn't. They came running, tickled to death. Little Ann took one of her silly spells. She started nipping at the long red tail of old Dan. Not getting any reaction from him, she jumped over him. She barked at him. He wouldn't look at her. She ran in front of him and laid down on the trail, acting like a cat ready to spring off. Stiff-legged, he walked up close to her and stopped and showed his teeth. I laughed out loud. I knew he wouldn't bite her any more than he would bite me. He was just acting tough because he was a boy dog. After several attempts to get him to play, Little Ann gave up. Together they stand sniffing around in the underbush. As I walked up in front of the store, Grandpa hollered at me to the barn. I went over to him right away. He wanted to know all about Reuben's accident. He listened while I told him the story over again. After I had had my say, Grandpa stood looking down at the ground. There was a deep frown in his face and a hurt in his eyes. The quietness made me feel uneasy. He finally raised his head, looked at me. What I could see in his friendly old face tore my heart. It seemed that there was more wrinkles than I had ever seen before. His uncombed iron gray hair looked almost white. I noticed that his wrinkled old hand trembled as he rubbed the wire-stiff stubble of his chin. In a low voice and a quiver that quivered as he talked, he said, "Billy, I am sorry about this, truly sorry. I can't help but feel that in a way, it was my fault." "No, Grandpa," I said, "it wasn't your fault. It wasn't anyone's fault. It just happened. No one could help it." "I know," he said, "but if I hadn't called Ruben's bet, none of this would ever happen. I guess when a man gets old, he doesn't think straight. I shouldn't let these boys get under my skin. Grandpa, I said, Ruben and Randy could get under anyone's skin. You couldn't help that. Why, they were under everyone's skin that got close to them. Yes, I said. Yes, I know, he said. But still, I acted like a fool. Billy, I had no idea they were going to turn out like this. Things were going to turn out like they did, or I wouldn't have called a bet. Waiting to change the conversation, I said, Grandpa, we won that bet fair and square. They took my money anyways. I saw the fire come back in Grandpa's eyes. This made me feel better. He was more like a grandpa I loved. That's all right, he said. We'll just forget about the whole thing. He stepped over and laid his hand on my shoulder. In a solemn voice, he said, we won't talk about this again. Now, I want you to forget it ever happened because it wasn't your fault. Oh, I know it's hard for a boy to completely forget things like this, although all through your life, you'll think of it now and then, and try not to let it bother you, or don't ever feel guilty about it. It's not good for a young boy to feel that way. I nodded my head, thinking if people would just stop questioning me about Ruben's death, maybe I could forget. Grandpa said, well, the accident wasn't the only thing I wanted to talk to you about. I've got something else, something I think will help both of us forget a lot of things. The twinkle in Grandpa's eyes reminded me of what my father had said. Seems like the old man can cook up more deals than anyone in the country. I didn't care how many deals Grandpa cooked up. He was still the best grandpa in the whole wide world. What have you got? I asked. Come over to the store, he said. I'll show you. On our way over, I heard him mutter, I hope this doesn't turn out like the ghost coon hunt. On entering the store, Grandpa walked to the post office department and came back with a newspaper in his hand. He spread out on the counter. Pointing his fingers, he said in a loud voice, look there. I looked. The large black letters read, Championship Coon Hunt to be held. My eyes popped open. As I read the words again, Grandpa was chuckling. I said, boy, if it isn't something. For a championship coon hunt, wide-eyed, I asked, why are they having this hunt? And what does it have to do with us? Grandpa was getting excited. Off came his glasses and out came the old red handkerchief. He blew his breath on his lens and polished them. He snorted a time or two, reared back and almost shouted, do with us? Why, it has everything to do with us. All my life I wanted to go to one of these big coon hunts. Why, I ever dreamed about it. And now the opportunity has come. Yes, sir, now I can go. He paused. That's it. That is if it's all right with you. I was dumbfounded. I said, all right with me? Why, Grandpa, you know it's all right with me, but what have I got to do with it? Grandpa was so excited I thought he was going to burst a blood vessel. Talking excitedly, he asked if I've got it all fixed, Billy. We can enter Old Dan and Little Ann in this championship hunt. I was so surprised at what Grandpa had said, I couldn't utter a word. At first I was scared, and then a wonderful feeling came over me. I felt excitement of the big hunt as it burned its way into my body. I started breathing like I had been running for 100 miles. After several attempts, I croaked, can just any dogs be in this hunt? Grandpa almost jumped when he answered, no, sir, not just any hounds can be entered. They have to be the best. They have to be registered too. He started talking with his hands pointing to the chair. He said, sit down and I'll tell you all about it. Grandpa calmed down a little and started talking in a serious voice. Billy, he said, it takes some doing to have a set of dogs enter in this hunt. I've been working for this for months, and I've written letters on top of letters. I've even had several good friends in town help me. You see, I kept records of all the coons your dogs have caught, and believe me, their catch is up there with the best of them. Now, I have already paid the entry fee and everything is fixed. All we have to do is go. Entry fee? How much did it cost? I asked. You let me worry about that, he said. Now, what do you say? Want to give it a swirl? I understand the winner receive a gold cup, and you never can tell. We might come home with it. We have as good as a chance as anyone. Grandpa had me so worked up by this time, I didn't think anyone else had good hounds but me. I reared back and blurted, it's all right with me, Grandpa. Just tell me what to do. Grandpa flew out of gear like a model T Ford. He slapped the counter with his hands, and I pinned it up In a pent-up voice, he said, "That's the boy. That's the way I like to hear a good coon hunter talk." With a question look on his face, he asked, "Didn't I see your dogs when you came up?" "Yes, they followed me," I said. "They're out there." "Well, call them in," he said. "I've got something for them." I called them. Little Ann came to the store walking like she was scared. Old Ann came to the door and stopped. I tried to coax them in. It was no use. My dogs had never been allowed in the house where they were and were scared to come in. Grandpa walked over to the hoop of the cheese and cut off 2 chunks about the size of my fist. He walked to the door talking to Old Dan. "What's the matter, boy?" he said. "You scared to come in? Well, that shows you're a good dog." He handed him a piece of cheese. I heard it rattle in his throat as he gulped it down. Grandpa came back and set little Ann up on the counter. He chuckled as he broke up the cheese up into small pieces and fed her. "Yes, sir," he said. I think we have the best darn coons in the Ozark Mountains, and just as sure as shooting, we're going to win that gold cup." Grandpa didn't have to say that. The way I was already feeling, I already had the gold cup. And all I had to do was get it. Finishing his feeding with little Ann, Grandpa said, "Now let's see. The hunt starts on the 23rd. That's about, well, let's see. This is the 17th." Counting with his fingers, he finally figured it out. 6 days from now," he said in a jubilant voice. I nodded my head. "We can leave here early in the morning of the 22nd, he said. "And barring accidents, we should make the campground in plenty of time for the grand opening." I asked how we're going. "Well, we'll go in my buggy," he said. "I'll load the tent and everything the night before." I asked him what he wanted me to bring. "Nothing," he said, "just the 2 little hounds, and you be here early. And I believe I'll get the dog, and I'll let the dogs, and I believe I'd let the dogs rest, because we want them in tip-top shape when we get there." I saw the thinking twinkle bunch up on Grandpa's forehead. "You reckon your daddy would like to go?" he asked. As late in the fall as it is, I don't think he's too busy, is he?" "No, our crops are all gathered," I said. "We've been clearing some of the bottom land, but that's almost done." "Well, ask him," he said. "Tell him I'd like him to go." "I'll ask him," I said, "but you know how Papa is. The farm comes first with him." "I know," Grandpa said, "but you ask him anyway, and tell him I said what I said. Now, it's getting late, and you better get home, be headed for home." I was almost to the door when Grandpa said, "Wait a minute." He walked over to the candy counter and shook out one of the quarter sacks. He filled it up to the top brim, bounced it on the counter a few times, and dropped a few more gumdrops. With a twinkle in his eyes and a smile on his head, he handed it to me, saying, "Save some for your sisters." I was so choked up I could hardly say anything. I took it and flew out the door, calling to my dogs. On the way home, I didn't walk on the ground. I was always up in the clouds, just skipping along with the song. I told the sycamore trees and a pop-eyed great squirrel how happy I was. Little Ann sensed my happiness. She pranced along the trail. With a doggish grin in her face, she begged for a piece of candy, which I so gladly gave. Even old Ann felt pleasant, and even old Dan felt the pleasant atmosphere. His long red tail fanned the air. Once he raised his head and bawled. I stood still, listening to the droning tunes of his deep voice. The sound seemed to be trapped for an instant in the thick timber. It rolled around under the tall white sycamores, beat its way through the wild cane, and found freedom out over the clear blue waters of the river. The sound followed the river course, rolled like the beat of the jungle drum. As the echo died away in the distance, silence set over the bottoms. The gray squirrels stopped their chattering. The wild birds quit their singing, and I stood still. No sound could be heard. It seemed that all the creatures of the wild were holding their breath. I gazed up to the tower heights of the tall trees. No tree was stirring. The silence seemed strained and expectant, like a young boy waiting for a firecracker to explode. I looked at old Dan. He was standing perfectly still with his right front foot raised and his long ears flanned open. He seemed to be listening and challenging every living creature to make a noise. The silence was broken by a wee of a red-tailed hawk. It seemed to be the signal. All around me, the happy atmosphere resumed its natural state. I heard the bam, bam, bam of a woodpecker high in the top of a box elder snag. The cry of a kingfisher and the scream of a blue jay blended perfectly with the drum-like beat. A barking red squirrel glued to the side of a hackleberry tree kept time to the music with the beat of its tail. All this real quick that I'm reading are sensory language. They're wanting us to use our imagination to visualize, create a mental image of all of the details that they're telling us, okay? Each noise I heard and each sight I saw was very familiar to me, but I never grew tired of listening and watching. They were a God-sent gift, and I enjoyed all of them. As I skipped along, it was hard for me to realize all the wonderful things that happened to me in such a few short years. I had two of the finest little hounds that had ever bawled on a trail of a ring-tailed coon. I had a wonderful mother and father and 3 sisters. I had the best grandpa a boy had ever. And to top it all, I was going on a champion coon hunt. It was wonderful. It was no wonder my heart was bursting with happiness. Wasn't I the luckiest boy in the world? Everyone was sitting down on the supper when I got home. My sisters quit the table for the candy. I told them to divide it equally. The older one asked if I wanted any of it. No, I said, I bought it all for you. Of course, I didn't tell them about the 4 pieces I had in my pocket. They thanked me with their clear blue eyes. I guess it's pretty hard for a young boy to fool his mama. She took one look at me and called me over. She ruffled my hair, kissed me, and said, if my little boy's eyes get any bigger, they're going to pop right out of his head. Now tell me, what are you so happy about? Before I could say anything, Papa chuckled and asked, what's going on with you and your grandpa? What are you and the old man cooking up now? As fast as I could talk, I started telling about the big coon hunt. I told how hard Grandpa had been working to have my dogs entered and how he had already paid my entry fee. Catching my breath, I looked at Papa. I said, we're going in his buggy and he wants you to go. I waited in silence for his reply. Papa sat there staring off into space, sipping his coffee, saying nothing. I knew what he was thinking. In the silence, I was sure I could hear my heart thumping. I said, Papa, please go. We'll have so much fun, and besides, the winner receives a big golden cup. He scratched his head and said, Billy, I'd sure like to go, but I don't see how I could with all the work around here. I was beginning to think that Papa wasn't going to go. Then Mama started talking. Work, she said. Why, all the work is practically done. I don't know of one thing you could do, you couldn't put off for a few days. Why don't you go? You haven't been anywhere since I don't know when. It's not only the work I'm thinking of, Papa said. You and the girls? Why, don't worry about me and the girls, Mama said. We'll be all right. Besides, it'll be several months before I need any help. When Mama said that, it dawned to me. I had been so busy with my coon hunting, I hadn't noticed anything unusual. Mama's tummy was all swelled up. She was going to have a baby. I felt guilty for not having noticed. I went over and put my arms around her and kissed her. Papa spoke up. It's sure going to be a big hunt, he said. I heard something about it up at the store one day. Grandpa said there will be hunters from everywhere, I said, and some of the best coon hounds in the country. Do you think you have a chance to win the cup? Papa asked. I started to answer when a little one piped up. I started to answer him when the little one piped up. They can't beat old Dan and little Ann, she said. They just can't. I just bet they can't. Everyone laughed at her serious remark. I could have kissed her, but she had candy cornbread, and molasses all over her face. I told Papa I didn't know how good those dogs were, but there was one thing I knew. I did know. If they beat mine, they would have to hunt harder than anyone had hunted before. After I had my say about the dogs, a silence settled over the dining room. Everyone was looking at Papa and waiting for an answer. I saw a pleased smile spread over his face. He stood up. All right, I'll go, he said. And by golly, we'll bring that gold cup back too. My sisters started clapping their hands and squirreling with delight. A satisfied smile spread over Mother's face. At that moment, I'm sure no boy in the world could have been happier than I was. Tears of happiness rolled down my cheeks. Mama wiped them away with her apron. In the midst of all the excitement, my little sisters, not saying a word, climbed down from the chair. No one said anything. We just watched her. Still clutching the spoon in her small hand, she came around the table and walked up to me. Looking down at the floor in a bashful voice, she said, Can I have the gold cup? Putting my finger under her sticky little chin, I tilted her head, I smiled, and I looked her clear into her clear blue eyes, and I said, honey, if I win, I'll give it to no one but you. I had to cross my heart and hope to die several times before she was satisfied. Back in her chair, she gloated over the others. You just wait and see, she said. It'll be all mine, nobody's but mine. And I'll put my batty eggs in it. Silly, you don't put batty eggs in a gold cup, the oldest one said. They're just made to look at. That night I dreamt about the gold cup, the little red hoons and coons as big as rain barrels. Once I woke myself up whooping at my dogs. The next few days were so busy ones for me. Knowing that Papa and I would be gone for several days, I did everything I could to make things convenient for Mama. I chopped large piles of wood and stacked it close to the kitchen door to make it easy for her to feed the stock. I cut the poles from the hillside and boxed up everything that stalls in the barn. I filled it full of hay so she wouldn't have to climb the ladder to the loft. Papa laid the law down for my sisters about being good helpers and good for Mama while we were gone. The day before we were to leave, I was so nervous as a June bug in a hen's house. The days seemed endless. A few of the miserable hours were spent talking to my dogs. I told them about the big hunt and how important it was. Now, if you don't win the gold cup, I said, I won't be mad because I know you will do your best. Old Dan wouldn't even look at me. He paid no attention to what I said. He was sulking because I hadn't been taking him hunting. When I talked to little Ann, it was different. She listened and seemed to understand everything I said. I dreaded to go to bed that night. I thought sleep would be impossible. I must have been more tired than I thought I was. I fell asleep almost immediately. Old Red, our rooster, woke me by daybreak, crowing his full head off. It was a beautiful morning, clear and frosty. After a good breakfast, we kissed Mama goodbye and started for the store. I'm sure there were a lot of coon hunters in the Ozarks, but on that morning, none could have felt as big, as important as I was. Walking along by the side of my father, I threw out my chest and tried hard to keep pace with his long strides. He noticed and laughed. You'll have to grow a little bit, he said, before you can take big steps that long. I didn't say anything, I just smiled. Hearing the noise overhead, I looked up. The gray ones were winging their ode southward. I listened to their talking and wondered what they were saying. Looking at the mountains around us, I saw the mysterious artist who comes at night and had paid us a visit. I wondered how he could paint so many different colors in one night. Red wine, yellow, and rust. My dogs were trotting along in front of us. I smiled at the way their hind quarters shifted to the right. Little Ann would jump and bounce and try to get old Dan to play, but the solemn old boy just jogged along, needless of everything. You know, Papa, she doesn't even act like a hound. She is bouncing and playing all the time. Why? She acts more like a little pup than a hound. Yes, I said. Yes, I know. I said, I noticed that myself. But you know one thing, Papa? She's the smartest dog I've ever seen. Why? Some of the things she does are so unbelievable. Yes, I know, said Papa. But still, it's strange, very strange. There's only one thing wrong with her, Papa, I said. Yeah, what's that? He asked. You won't believe it. I said, she's gun shy. Gun shy? How do you know she's gun shy? Papa asked. I didn't know for a long time, I said, until one day I was hoeing corn down in the field by the old slough. She and old Dan were digging in the banks around the groundhog. Across the river, some fishermen started shooting guns. It scared little Ann, and she came running to me, shaking all over. Papa said, maybe you just thought she was scared. No, I didn't, Papa. I know. I said, it happened again up at the store one day. Grandpa shot a chicken hawk. When the gun went off, it scared her half to death. No, she's gun shy, all right. Oh, well, Papa said, that doesn't mean anything. A lot of dogs are afraid of guns. I know, I said, but you wouldn't think she would be that way. I believe if I had a gun of my own, I could break her of being gun shy. Papa looked at me and said, from what your mother says, you won't be getting a gun for some time. Yes, I know. When we reached the store, we saw the team was already hitched to the team was already hitched to the buggy and was standing in the front of the store. Grandpa had loaded the tent in several boxes of groceries. I had never seen him in such a high spirits. He slapped Papa on the back, saying, "I'm sure glad you could go with us. It'll do good to get out once in a while." Papa laughed and said it looked like I had to go or have everyone in the family mad at me. Looking at the buggy, I saw my axe. I didn't think I'd ever wanted to see it again. But for some reason, it didn't look like I thought it would. There was no blood on it, and it looked harmless enough laying there in all clean and bright. Papa saw me looking at it. He came over. I kept it a few days, he said, just in case the marshals wanted to ask some questions. Everything seemed to be all right now. We may need a good axe on the hunt. Grandpa sensed how I felt about the axe. He waited in silence for my answer. The excitement of the hunt was so strong in me, even the sight of the axe brought back only a fleeting remembrance of Reuben's accident. Yes, I will. Yes, I said, yes, we will need one. Besides, it's a good one, and there's no use in throwing it away. Grandpa laughed, reached over, and screwed my cap around the back of my head, saying, "That's the boy. That's what I wanted you to say. Now, you better go to the barn, get some of that hay, and make a bed in the buggy box for your dogs." All Grandpa, I said. "They can walk. They haven't gotten tired. Besides, they're used to walking." "Walk?" Grandpa almost shouted. "They're not going to walk. No, sir, if I can help it. You want them to be footsore when we get there?" Papa chuckled and said, "We can't win a gold cup with 2 footsore hounds, can we?" "Of course not," Grandpa said. "Now you go and get that hay like I said." As I turned to go to the barn, I couldn't help but smile. It made me feel good to have my Papa and Grandpa so concerned about my dogs. I had only taken a few steps when Grandpa said, "Wait a minute." I stopped and turned around. Walking up to me, glanced towards the house. As he did, he whispered, "In the empty crop barrel in the harness room, there's a jug of corn liquor. Cover it up in your hay so your grandma won't see it, and bring it back with you." With a twinkle in his eyes, he said, "You can never tell when we'll need some medicine." I know my father wouldn't drink any of the liquor, but if Grandpa wanted to take along a whole barrel, it was all right with me. Just when I thought we were ready to leave, Grandma came bursting out. Grandpa got nervous. He whispered and asked, "Did you hide the jug good?" I nodded. Grandma handed Grandpa a pair of long-handled underwear and a scarf, saying, "I know you'll forget something." Grandpa snorted, but knew there was no use in arguing with her. She started picking around the groceries, asking about salt, pepper, and matches. "Nanny, we've got everything," he said. "You must think I'm a baby and I don't know how to pack a grub box." "A baby?" Grandma snorted. "Why, you're worse than a baby. At least they'll have a sense. You don't have any at all. The old cogger like you out chasing coons all over the hills." After her bitter remark, I thought Grandpa was going to blow up. He snorted like Daisy, our milk cow, when she had seen a booger. I crawled up in the buggy box with my dogs and hung my feet out. Grandma came over and asked me about warm clothes. I told her I got plenty. She kissed me goodbye, and we were on our way. Boy, that was a long chapter 14, but it's very exciting because Billy is going to be in this championship coon hunt. So they're on their way, packed up, Billy, Grandpa, and Papa, and he's now going on this new adventure of his life to experience this championship coon hunt. So tune in tomorrow for chapter 15 of Where the Red Fern Grows. I hope you enjoyed it.